Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance in this incredible panel dialogue of continuing education through our fellowship of the ring, so to speak, with the new Untouchables and featuring in our center a new edition of the new Untouchables. A gentleman from the great state of Utah, former mayor and presidential candidate, a gentleman by the name of Ross Rocky Anderson. And he is in the center. And like always, I will provide detailed descriptions of people's writings and their websites and public facing information so we can all be on the same page. And like always, to my immediate left is June Carbone, of course, the Rabina Chair of Science, Technology, and Law from the University of Minnesota. To my immediate right, former AG of Ohio and acting partner of the Dan Law Firm from the great state of Ohio. My underneath June is, of course, Eric Vaughn, the principal and producer of Red Point Digital Media, and also I will say, the producer of Corruption Incorporated, The American Way, which is really churning out some incredible material. It's great to see you again. To Rocky's right, Paul Peltier from the great state of Virginia, vis-a-vis Massachusetts, and of course, decades in the Department of Justice, who will provide incredible revelations, I think, and reactions to some of the stuff we're going to be engaged in. And of course, down below, the gentleman who needs no introduction. We saw something, we said something, and I'm sure it says underneath that, that's when things got strange. Yep, I remember that from the Whistleblowers United, Bank Whistleblowers United. And I think, guys, to start off the dialogue today, the Supreme Court just issued its decisions vis-a-vis, of course, birthright citizenship and other things that seem to be tied together, from gun rights to all sorts of decisions regarding, obviously, what everybody's watching in terms of immigration and so forth. And I think I'd like to just maybe start with you, Paul, since we missed you last time. What are your immediate reactions to what you saw coming down the pike this afternoon?
Well, immediate reactions, I guess, are what probably everybody's are, is that this is what you get when you have a court packed with six people picked from the Federalist Society who are handpicked by the Federalist Society to be on the Supreme Court. I thought it was remarkable that the vitriol in the dissent against the majority just leveled at the majority for their sort of creating this imperial presidency. And Amy Coney Island Barrett replying back to the extent that, oh, well, what would you rather have, an imperial Supreme Court, imperial court? Well, at the end of the day, what is very clear to me is that the Supreme Court doesn't mind being imperial. They just don't want the district court judges to be imperial, number one. And number two, I think it's very clear and very important to note that the six justices also had three concurring opinions. One of them by, of course, Judge Thomas, who would have gone further. Number two by Alito, would have gone further. And the third one, which I found very interesting, was a concurring opinion by Justice Kavanaugh, who sort of tried to ameliorate the effects of the opinion just by saying, oh, this really isn't going to be that bad. So it's just another line of Supreme Court cases which creates an imperial presidency. And it was just amazing to me that they talked in terms of an imperial presidency, but not in three equal branches of government, and the role of the Supreme Court in those three equal branches of government. But I think what people will remember would be Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent, which was very, very powerful.
Mark, I found it pretty enlightening and
Yes.
invigorating, considering your proclamation last week. Can we just elevate the truth above this madness of lies? And of course, we saw this past week, on full display, Mr. Bove's response to, I guess his hearings, his confirmation hearings about potentially being elevated to the third district, but in the context of, I think his quote was, tell them to go fuck themselves or something along those lines. They, to the decisions that were coming down based on what we were seeing last week with all of things immigration in California. Can you comment on that and maybe your comment, your reaction to what just happened in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was interesting. Bove did not ever say that he didn't say that. He was very, and I mean, obviously, the majority members of that committee are, I'm sure, are going to just ignore the facts that are in front of them, and move his confirmation forward. But I mean, it is just the idea that you're going to put on the second highest court in the country somebody who is willing to instruct lawyers to disregard court orders is very troubling. And I don't know how he expects people to follow his orders when the time comes. I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the sauce, and there's going to be a change election coming in the next two cycles. And they're going to, I think a lot of these conservatives and conservative legal folks are going to start to really regret the trap that they've built for themselves here. Should democracy prevail at the end of the day? On the issue of truth over lies, I don't know if anybody saw this, but I got a news flash this afternoon that Gavin Newsom is suing Fox News over the false reporting of a conversation that he never had with President Trump. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I'd hope would start to happen. Not just with governors, though, but with everybody. The individuals that are being maligned, the individuals that are being this poor whistleblower whose name is being dragged through the mud, to find as many possible footholds to be held accountable for that. On the Supreme Court decision today, because I'm going to go quick because there's a lot of people, but at least they are starting to appreciate class actions again, which is good for my class action practice. So I'm happy about that. If there's any silver lining in that at all. And I don't know if you saw, but literally within a few hours of the decision in Maryland on the very issue of birthright citizenship, one of the cases that was pending was amended into a class action, following Judge Coney Barrett's recommendation that the power to grant a nationwide injunction in the existence of a class action is possible. Now, doing this work on a day-to-day basis, the idea of trying to get a class certified in a timely fashion to get a meaningful injunction against an executive order, it's a tall order, but the people making those decisions are the people that the Supreme Court just took a dump on, and so I think that they may help facilitate the ability to get those classes at least tentatively certified to the point where they can where they would have be in a better position to issue that order. So, look, the lawyers have to meet the moment. They have to meet the challenge, whether that means filing thousands of cases when it would have taken one before, or whether it means getting those classes certified and figuring out a legal strategy through that will put them in safe harbor under Judge Coney Barrett's decision. That's what we got to do, and just like I actually I've talked about we should flood the zone like they should. I think we actually need to play a prevent defense. I mean, we need to flood the other end of the court with our folks bringing these cases. And so, look, I think the bar in this country is up to it. I'm looking forward. I'm going to be with the American Bar Association president on Tuesday, or a week from Tuesday, and I'm interested to hear what he has to say. But we have a role to play. We can be the patriots in this story, or we can be the cowards. And I'm hoping that we turn out to be the patriots.
Wow, a lot to react to, Rocky, from this perspective. But I also wanted to kind of dovetail into you were well known throughout the country on your stance on the Iraq War many, many years ago. And yet we just saw last week, obviously, however you want to characterize Trump's position to attack and what we saw. And obviously a lot to react to based on the opening sequence here. But maybe if you could insert some of your feelings about that as well.
Well, you referred to the Iraq War, and I was also advocating, along with a number of people, but no major city mayors joining with me, which I thought was really unfortunate, because I think we all have, whatever position of leadership we're in, we have an absolute patriotic political and moral duty to stand up on these issues. And right now, with the bombing of Iran, with no debate in Congress, no counsel by Congress, no approval, whether statutory or through declaration of war, was a constitutional outrage. And the fact that it's been done before cannot be said to provide any kind of precedent, legal precedent, for allowing a president to so blatantly disregard the fact that under our Constitution, the president is empowered only to decide on his or her own to commit forces to attack another nation in instances of self-defense, where there's been to repel a sudden attack or an imminent attack on the United States or our armed forces, wherever they might be in the country. And it's also, of course, a heinous violation of the international prohibition against crimes against peace. We tried, convicted, and saw to it that people were executed at Nuremberg for exactly this crime. And Robert Jackson, the Supreme Court Justice, who was the chief prosecutor, said at that time in his opening statement that while the international crime against peace, the crime of war of aggression, although we're applying it to Germans here today, if that prohibition is to have any meaning at all, it must be applied to every nation, including those sitting in judgment here today. And when the United States does it, there's got to be accountability. And this is a prime opportunity for Congress to stand up and assert their sole constitutional prerogative to decide whether war should be commenced. Now, once that's decided, if they decide to go to war, then of course the president is to manage the war as commander-in-chief, but still with powers of Congress, including the power of the purse, to determine what happens from there on. The really amazing thing, and I'm saying this from Utah, but I think we see it in a number of other places, but probably nowhere as vividly as we do with regard to Senator Mike Lee. During the Biden administration, Senator Lee joined with Bernie Sanders, with Senator Murphy, in introducing the National Security Powers Act, which would have provided that the president can only commit our armed forces in attacking another country if there's been statutory authority by Congress, if there's been a declaration of war by Congress, or if we have been attacked, we're imminently going to be attacked, or our armed forces or citizens elsewhere have been attacked by the country that we're going to be attacking. Those were the only three instances. And Senator Lee reiterated that so many times during the Biden administration with regard to the Houthis in Yemen. He said, no, you cannot go after them without statutory authority or declaration by Congress because they haven't attacked us. He was so adamant about this, so heartfelt. And I was proud of him. That's one time that I've said Senator Lee is absolutely right on the mark. And then he made a comment in an op-ed that he drafted that we can't allow Senator Biden to sleepwalk us into a war against Iran. And he's got to have a declaration of war or statutory authority by Congress to engage in any military action. Well, now that it's President Trump and not President Biden, and showing his unbelievable sycophancy toward President Trump, all we see from Senator Lee now is a congratulatory tweet on X, on his X account, saying we wiped out Iran, and it was a false statement too, but obviously he was depending on the president's statement that we'd obliterated Iran's nuclear force. But that's what Senator Lee did. He didn't say, you can't do this. We're going to come after you. We're going to start articles of impeachment. You have usurped, and that's a word that he used against Biden. So he said presidents of both parties have been usurping the sole power of Congress to decide on matters of war. And by the way, it's so clear in the constitutional history from Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, even President George Washington. He wouldn't even commit troops to go after an Indian tribe without Congress saying that it was okay, because the power to commence war or engage in acts of war was to be decided upon by Congress. So there is no question at all that it was a massive violation here by President Trump, and those who will line up behind him so blindly on everything, no matter how cruel, no matter how illegal, no matter how contemptuous of the courts and in violation of the separation of power and checks and balances, people like Senator Lee saying, well, we wiped out Iran's nuclear power last night without one peep about the fact that President Trump did that without any authorization by Congress. And we, the people, and I think the bar especially, needs to raise this issue. You know, there was a great resolution by the American Bar Association during the Bush administration against signing statements, saying you can't exempt yourself, you can't get around the obligation to either veto legislation or accept it as written by doing a signing statement saying, well, I'm signing this legislation, but I'm interpreting it as not applying to the executive branch, as President Bush did so many times, including in the anti-torture statute passed by Congress. But I think I hope that when you talk to the president of the American Bar Association, you suggest that they put together a committee on the imperial presidency, and that they make the point explicitly clear that the president is without authority to engage our military forces in another country unless we're under attack or imminently going to be under attack, without a declaration of war or statutory authorization by Congress.
Well, whether it's an assault on the law or through Congress, we don't listen to what they say. We watch what they do. And you know, turning this to both you, June, and Bill, in kind of response to that connection between what Rocky had just laid out and Senator Mike Lee. Obviously, last week we were all horrified by Mike Lee's proclamation of the murder of your state representative, Ms. Hortman, and her husband, and of course the other folks that were shot as well. Can you comment about how you're reacting to a lot of what you've just heard? June.
Sure. Let me say Melissa Hortman was a University of Minnesota law grad. Many of my colleagues, including our dean, have worked closely with her. They all sing her praises as somebody who is a person of integrity, commitment, graduated from law school, took up social justice issues, then became active in politics, worked on a bipartisan basis, has gotten and shepherded through recent legislation in the face of a razor-thin Republican majority in one of the houses, and is just a person of immense honor, grace, compassion, commitment. And what happened to her is absolutely tragic. So when you see somebody, a U.S. senator, repeating lies, repeating conspiracy theories without bothering to check the facts, that besmirch the honor of somebody who's just assassinated and who is doing this not even for political gain. I assume this hurts him in the not so long run, but rather because it proves his MAGA bona fides. That lying, being overtly political, dishonoring the dead is now a sign you belong in a movement characterized from top to bottom by dishonesty and dishonor. And I think the flagrant violation of the rule of law, which occurs every day, and happy to comment on the Supreme Court, is simply part of the same mindset. It's a middle finger to the institutions of the United States and to the honor, integrity, and competence of the United States.
I apologize. Do you want to continue with just your reaction to what happened in the Supreme Court today?
Sure, but did other people want to comment on?
Bill, it seems like that would be an appropriate place with everything that's been discussed so far for you to provide some guidance.
Okay, so first, Minnesota at this time is like going into a time machine back in the past. We have the most closely divided state legislature in America. And they managed to work together to compromise and lead to a friendly package in which people were shaking hands from both sides, hugging. It's all very Minnesota nice type of stuff. And in that context, that is actually what outraged MAGA. That people could actually work together in the common interest. Because their system depends on demonizing others by lying about everything. And what I've emphasized in prior programs is people understate enormously the consequences of an administration that is truly based on lying. Nothing can work appropriately. All of the things that we hold most holy, most central, most revere, all of those things, family, love, working, for each other and such, none of those things can survive a program based on lies. And remember, you could not get a senior position in this administration unless you were willing to lie. Right? The fundamental lie about who won the election, the fundamental lie about the attack on the Capitol. And then after that, it became essential to say anyone who told the truth must be lying. So it became a war on those. And then it became, you must, in representing us, and the three of us at least have been Justice Department attorneys. And, obviously state AGs take the same approach to this. We don't lie in court. We don't come close to lying in court. It's not like we try to go up to the line of a lie in court, right? We are taught to, be actual parts of the justice system, that it isn't just a name in those circumstances. But these people will destroy you if you insist on telling the truth. Right? They will sue you. They will fire you. They just got rid of the UVA head, the president. They will extend this power through every walk of life. This king stuff, no kings, it's exactly right. The Supreme Court, we got this particular order, but the big order, of course, was the immunity decision. that the President of the United States literally can murder his political opponents. All he has to do is phrase it correctly to get immunity, right? And if Trump had any competent lawyers, and he doesn't have many, that would be an easy bar to do. But I understand why the focus has been on no kings, but it has to also be on and no robber barons. Because the kings and the robber barons work together. And it's the robber barons who, for example, have in particular so corrupted the Supreme Court that the rule of law mostly doesn't exist on a lot of big items. It's more complicated than that. The 6 Republican justices still want to be thought of. They want to look in a mirror and still think they're a justice. So we will win some things, but I warned last week that a lot of our early wins the percentage where we were winning like 96%, that's going to change, right? The Supreme Court is going to make sure that it changes. A lot of courts of appeals are going to make sure that doesn't. But that doesn't mean that Mark, for example, when what he was saying isn't dead on right. They've created with today's decision, they've created a weakness. They have literally thousands of Justice Department attorneys resigning or seeking counsel about whistleblower protection. Thousands. They do not have the capacity to put out enough liars. And so if they multiply litigation, which is what this decision can do, where we have not 4 precedential actions, but 400 precedential actions, for example, they're going to run out of liars real quick. And our strategy is based, that we've been promoting, is based in part on that fundamental weakness. We need to drive them to the point where they are going to instruct Justice Department attorneys or wink and nod Justice Department attorneys that you need to perjure yourself. And we did just finally in New York get, a full-scale yanking of the bar license and such. And that will be devastating. As soon as that happens to an active Justice Department attorney, a serious sanction by a court, it's going to send an absolute shockwave. And that was in large part what we need to be aiming to achieve quickly.
Rocky, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, and Bill, those are really great points. I wanted to follow up on June's discussion about Mike Lee and the utter lies, the response to this tragedy in Minnesota. And let's not forget, it was also the husband of a legislator who was killed and 2 other people seriously injured. And to be the one other dimension to this that I think we really need to be talking about, and that is even to MAGAs who have been lining up blindly behind this insanity up to this point, there is such a snarkiness, an unbelievable divisiveness being driven by these people now, unprecedented. I mean, we've had divisiveness in politics, certainly going back to Jefferson and Adams, and from there on, but never, ever with the kind of childish snarkiness that's been demonstrated by these people, and nothing epitomizes that more than Senator Lee's comments about these tragedies in Minnesota. And I think it would behoove us to keep reminding people the depths to which these people will go. And then It's not just on social media. Look at Pete Hegseth's treatment of the media the other day. He went, I guess it was just yesterday, how this goes so quickly, but he was a crazy person that would not answer questions, that we are represented by the media. And I think we need to remind people that too. This isn't the media versus the executive branch. The media is representing the people of this country so that we can find out the truth, which is an essential foundational element to our democracy. If we don't know the truth, we can't exercise democracy. And yet they're treated and even called the enemy by President Trump and his lackeys on this cabinet. And we shouldn't tolerate it. We need answers to these questions, like Pam Bondi, when she goes before Congress. She's asked a direct question, and it's just, they're always on the attack and going after with these ad hominem charges against those who are simply asking the questions, the answers to which we are all entitled.
Well said. And I feel compelled to move it to you, Eric, but I'm going to just quickly, I saw Paul lean in, and it's not very often I see that. So I'm going to ask you, Paul, to chime in.
I just wanted to try and close the thread on what everyone is talking about here, at least as it relates to the Department of Justice. So all of us on this panel that have worked at the Department of Justice understand what a jewel that has been and how it's dependent upon the truth of prosecutors, not just truth of lawyers, the truth, the way that judges historically and juries can rely upon the truth that federal prosecutors tell them. And what astounds me and disappoints me immensely is that these whistleblowers, like the Bove whistleblower, were told that Bove, this is the Deputy Assistant Attorney General, right, is telling the prosecutors to mislead the courts, to mislead the courts. That's nothing that I could ever imagine happening in the Department of Justice that I worked in for almost 27 years, right? So I really think there's the point there is that they're trying, they want to take away the power that the Department of Justice has in some way. We saw the prosecutor, not the whistleblower, but the prosecutor in the Abrego Garcia case, the lead prosecutor who quit because the Department of Justice was telling him to do things which he believed were unethical and not right. We saw all the prosecutors in New York who quit rather than make misrepresentations to the court in the Mayor Adams case. So we all see what they're doing to derogate the value that prosecutors and Department of Justice had in our justice system. This tears down everything that we stood for. I mean, when I was a prosecutor, right made might, right? We were strong because we knew we would only tell the truth and judges would believe us. That's what gave us a lot of our strength. And that is being torn down now. And I just see that as intentional. And I see that as a tearing of the fabric on purpose of what we all stood for and what the department stands for. And I think some of it is intentional.
Eric, I feel so honored to be in front of these people that we have been so fortunate to connect with over the years on our journey, because we're really just regular people that became producers. I mean, that's what we did. But in terms of investigating and learning how things work, we learned from the best. And they're sitting in front of us, and they're not on all of mainstream television. That's a huge problem. And more media trying to get this to everybody we can. We've just heard some of the most experienced in the law at the highest levels and representing cities and, obviously the state of Ohio and so on and so forth, all echoing the same thing.
Right.
Why? And it's our purpose to be able to illuminate that. How are you responding to this, my friend?
Well, so we've kind of grown into positions of being part of this ever-growing segment called independent media. And I think we need to remember that there's a really good reason why people such as our panel who have true expertise, who really know what they're talking about and have like real important things to say, aren't being shared on so many of the larger news media sites that are out there, whether it's television or whether it's online. And I think that going back to the concept of robber barons, um, I think we also have to, acknowledge the fact right now that one of the reasons why independent media is becoming a thing is because the robber barons have, to such a large extent, purchased the news media otherwise. And I think that that's why, we have, I mean, I think that that increases the toxic environment that we find ourselves in. I mean, we talked about the childishness and, and just the vindictiveness of the language that's coming out of this administration. And I go back to just, I think yesterday was Chris Cuomo on his show. And so Zoran Mandani, wins the Democratic um, the nomination for mayor of New York. And what does the first thing he does is start spitting out lies, lie after lie after lie about this man who just won the nomination. And then you also look at how the money is starting to organize itself in New York around this. It's like, Andrew Cuomo loses. He loses so significantly that he's basically lost, all of his traction with the, I'll just say the robber barons of New York. And so now they're lining up behind Adams again. Why is that? I mean, I think we know exactly why. It's because this robber baron aspect that Bill is talking about is so alive and so active. And I think that that makes our role as, the independent media that much more critical and that much more of a tough slog to get the word out on such things, because we're not owned by the robber barons. And we talk to people who also aren't owned by the robber barons. And so, yeah, it's a very difficult media landscape. But I think it also just makes our job here in trying to get these voices out that much more critical. And I mean, you know how hard it is. I mean, you know that we're not, how difficult it is to get the numbers in order to make an impact. We're trying, we're doing everything that we can. And I think that we're going to succeed, but it's a long, tough slog. But we're doing it. And, it's, I'm honored that that we found the right people and we're talking to them and that we're giving them a platform because that's what needs to happen. Because exactly what we've been talking about over the past several weeks is that for the regular people of this country to be able to have an understanding that there is something that they can do and that we have people who can point them in the right direction is so incredibly critical because one of the biggest things that's preventing people from being involved politically is that hopelessness, that thought that there's nothing that we can do. And the very fact that not only are we talking about these issues, but that we have such wonderful minds, that are here, on this panel, not to go and, brush it, raise everybody up. I'm not here to stroke egos. I'm just saying the truth is critically important because the second I feel that a critical mass of regular people understand that there is a possibility to do something about this, that there is a way to fight back, I think something dramatic for the good can happen.
Well, and that has been on display the last, several protests with No Kings and 50501. And I was so inspired by Rocky standing across the crowd from me raising his signs. And that's why I thought to reach out to you. But I want to turn this back to you, Mark, because, we're building the plane and flying it at the same time. And one thing Eric and I discovered years ago was that like both of our favorite films, as it turns out, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, that seminal point where Indy is discovers with Sala that the Nazis are digging in the wrong place. That's what I feel with media and the misdirection and the lies and everything else. Everybody is looking and being played by lies, and yet the truth is right in front of them if we can get it to them, right? And so here we are with this initiative that I think really bridges what we heard from Rocky and June and Bill, so emotionally tied to what happened in Minnesota, but that's tied to this monstrous, platform of X that is propagandizing in a way that Goebbels would have been impressed by, right? Millions of lies per second and amplifying somebody like Mike Lee in that particular situation. Can you comment from your perspective of our initiative of Section 230 maybe and kind of address what you think the possibilities are to address this problem?
Well, first of all, when I think Mayor, when the President Trump's advisors told him he could only launch a strike for self-defense, I think he heard self-promotion instead, and acted on that. So I think that's that. It just was a figure of speech that caused those bombs to drop. Unfortunately, yeah, I think we have to make it. We have to find paths. Look, there are people who are protest is great, and I want to protest, and I know people that do, and I support their efforts, and but there's going to be people to defend those protesters when the time comes that they start to crack down like they tried to provoke in Los Angeles, and I mean I'm so proud of the people that protested there and how they managed to avoid giving the president what he was looking for there, which was a big debacle and a fight but those times are going to come. We've got to be there. But I know what there are things that lawyers can do. I know, we've got to develop a system of recruitment and training for lawyers to be able to take on this, begin defending these cases from under our hoop all the way to their hoop. We have to be able to bring, if we have to bring a case in every judicial district in the country on birthright citizenship, well, let's do it. Let's get the lawyers mobilized. I know people want to help. But what we don't have is a good platform. I mean, certainly the Democratic Party hasn't provided that platform. But there needs to be a process and a way to connect need with talent on our side. So for sure that has to happen. When it comes to speech, the libel laws in most states and in this country are actually very robust. And we need to start to take advantage of them. And if you can't sue the platform because of Section 230, which apparently the robber barons who control both sides of both parties in Congress isn't going to let happen, then you need to sue the speakers. And you can, and whether they have money or not, people need to have a consequence when they tell a lie, and when that lie has impact on people's lives. These whistleblowers' lives, they need to be aggressively defended, both under federal whistleblower protection, state whistleblower protection, and this, by the way, this stuff's happening at the state level too. I mean, this week we brought we've been working on a case to stop the state from stealing $600 million of people's unclaimed funds to give to billionaire Jimmy Haslam to build a stadium here in Cleveland. The open corruption that's going on, in light of the fact that between the Supreme Court and the current Constitution of the Justice Department, there's literally no risk that anybody's going to get prosecuted for political corruption in this country right now. Zero. And the state prosecutors need to step up and fill that gap. They need to prove them wrong, because every state's got laws against corruption too. So the state elected officials, the state prosecutors, the local mayors, they need to not keep people are still sitting with their heads down under their desks, just hoping to survive 4 years. That is not going to work in this circumstance. Those folks everybody's got to figure out what their path is. What is your personal plan to fight back against tyranny to fight back against this effort to break the rule of law. Those of us who believe in the rule of law need to do something every day and every week and every month to do that. So I'm hoping through this group we can find a platform and create a platform for people to be able to do that, to match the need with the talent.
Well, and that's what we're doing. That's called the new Untouchables, my friends. And I will close when I do with all of those links and so forth. But I want to turn this briefly to you, Paul, because one thing that sent shivers down my spine this week, as really all of it has from the beginning, from the executive orders, from DOJ to the insanity of everything with, we saw with, and I want to remind people what Bill brought up several weeks ago. We need legislatures to press subpoenas against Elon Musk for what we saw on display that took place between he and Trump with that, let's call it the breakup, if it were, that everybody's forgot about after 3 weeks of whatever insanity has been in the mix of this. But yesterday, Paul, knowing that Bove would tell his I don't want to call them surrogates, but the team at the Department of Justice to lie, and what you had talked about, you got to consider that. Well, behind that has got to be another initiative, probably to intimidate whistleblowers, to tackle whistleblowers. Can you maybe put some corners on, really, from your perspective, what this is looking like? I mean, what happens if the Department of Justice is literally, working as it were for Putin, for example, right? I mean, that's what this feels like. That's what it feels like. What's next, man? The stuff that what happened with the guy that went to prison in Navalny, right? Okay, I'll stop there.
Well, first of all, I think that what Bove said and did yesterday should disqualify him from ever sitting as a judge or as a lawyer anywhere. I mean, at the end of the day, he refused to answer questions that literally should have been answered. But the reality is he's probably going to get confirmed, and that I think is really sinful. I think it's really sinful. As it relates to whistleblowers, I'm not an expert on that. Mark is probably a better person to answer questions about that. And I think I'd prefer to hear June and Bill's views on sort of where they think this is going as it relates to Bove's actions and testimony.
Okay, well, I'll turn it back to you. And we're getting towards the end of the dialogue here, Bill. Can you pick up with that and maybe kind of forward, project the platform to fight?
Okay, so the Justice Department whistleblower should be subpoenaed promptly this week, next week, in state legislatures and testify about exactly what happened, right? So you want not just an affidavit-ish type document, you want live testimony, and we've talked about how to do that. But let me do one other link to the con. The Democrats establishment was all in on Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo was Clinton's HUD secretary. And in that capacity, Andrew Cuomo deliberately defeated what was the most effective effort to end the campaign of predation against Black and Hispanic homeowners. So, as the con talks about, right, the big scam was the yield spread premium. That was a kickback that the lenders paid to the loan brokers to induce them to predate on the customers. A Harvard prof, working with economists, put together a whole case explaining this scheme. And kickbacks are banned under federal law. So they should have been prosecuted criminally. Not only did they not prosecute them criminally, not only did Cuomo not use HUD to crack down, not only did Cuomo not go public and warn people about this, he actually adopted a statement for the explicit purpose of defeating the ability to have a class action, which is the only effective way to stop this. Saying, oh, no, no, no. Yeah, I mean, kickbacks is kind of a harsh way to look at it. You can conceive of a circumstance where it might not be, abusive and such. That is the man the Democratic establishment went behind. That act of predation against blacks and Hispanics. So if you had a college degree as a Hispanic or black homeowner in the great financial crisis, you lost respectively, Hispanics, over 60% of your wealth, and blacks right around 50% of your wealth. A staggering economic catastrophe brought on by absolutely indefensible practices of paying kickbacks. And that was the big thing Cuomo did as HUD secretary. And I don't think a single person mentioned it in this race because it's not public, because the con, never got into his second season.
Right. Well, and on that note, what I'll say to you, Rocky, to close this out, because I was reminded of Senator Mike Lee and open lands, something that's near and dear to both of our hearts, because when you think of the revolving door and what we're about to see in the state of Utah and our magical, national parks and everything else that we saw, just assuming forward what we saw, with Bears Ears during the first administration, when you consider this corruption, when you consider this revolving door, based on what Bill just said, because you can imagine, right? Who was the money behind Cuomo, given what Bill just laid out? That's the entirety of the too big to fail apparatuses, obviously, among others, that control the whole system. So closer to home and closing this dialogue, I don't know, what's a natural come from for you, given everything that we've discussed, Rocky?
In terms of the public lands issue, or
well, I just think
all the way around?
Corruption and the whole thing, and lies, and just politicians, and where we are, and what honest guys like you have been fighting for forever, and what we're in the midst of, and what we can do to really think about this as we close out of this dialogue.
Well, it all comes down
where the Democratic Party is.
It all comes down to the corrupting influence of money, and both of these parties have been at the trough of corrupting money for as long as we can see, but it's picked up steam over the past couple of decades, unbelievably, to the point where, we call it Obamacare. It's not Obamacare, it was Insuracare. The insurance industry drafted that legislation, and they went laughing all the way to the bank when Obamacare was passed. We see it in terms of certainly the defense industry, the war industry in this country, and the fact that you've got people in Congress that are appropriating money just because they've got contractors on obsolete weapons that we're still building, but the money's going back to their home districts. We're being sold down the river, the people of this country, in every single way. I mean, hell, we have a president who's selling his own phony coins to these people and then holding a dinner, and we can't even get Pam Bondi to answer a direct question from a member of Congress. Are you going to look into the fact that there are all these people from foreign nations? And at that dinner, honoring the people that spent the most money on these Bitcoins, that a lot of the money's going straight into the Trump family's pockets. And she won't even answer that question. She just goes on the attack like Pete Hegseth and like Bobby K, like the whole crowd of these people. They figured out from President Trump, well, really been told how to do it. Don't answer the questions, go on the attack, and be sure that the media is in the middle of your target. So we, the people, we need to align. It's not left, right, Democrat, Republican. It's the people of this country. We've got to demand that the public interest comes first. in whatever Congress does and whatever the President of the United States does. And we're all being left behind by these self-serving people. And I think that the polls show it time and time again. The people generally in this country are fed up with the corruption. And it didn't start in 2008, but it certainly came to a head in 2008 with devastating consequences. And thank you, Patrick, for your unbelievable efforts in trying to get the truth out to the American people. But we've got to keep it up. This is the same pattern over and over again. And with the midterms coming up, we've got to put this out there. And it's not just, you know, so-called progressives or liberals against the conservatives. This is the people up against the plutocrats, the billionaire class, who are absolutely screwing the people of this country, even to the point of taking food and medical services away from those most in need.
Yeah, we didn't even get a chance to talk about the big, beautiful bill. I guess we'll have to put that on the sidelines until later. Boy, June, I would like to talk to you on this for another several hours. We've run out of time, guys. I want to say thank you on behalf of my colleague, Eric Vaughn, and I could not be more proud to hear that, because we won't quit as long as we know there's folks like you that exist, that we can work together to overcome this madness that's overcome our country. For those of you looking for more information, please discover our new execution on YouTube for the new Untouchables on YouTube. We have a new website landing page called thenewuntouchables.com. We're going to be all over Blue Sky as well as X, all of the obviously social media and so forth. And then I would also like to steer you to check out my colleague's work, Eric Vaughn, at Corruption Incorporated, The American Way. He's churning out some amazing information. And on behalf of liberty and justice for all, my name is Patrick Lovell, signing off for now. Please tune in next week. We'll keep it coming. Thank you to all for participating.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks for what you guys are doing.
Nice to meet you, Rocky.
Very nice to meet all of you.